Hello, can you hear me?
This meeting of the Albany County Planning and Zoning Commission to order. We'll start with a quick roll call. Ms. Hanning here. Mr. Platt here. Ms. Kokornik is out on other business. Ms. Ben David, we have not seen, absent at this point. Hinkley is here. So we have quorum, we can proceed. We have a fairly long agenda. Some of the items may go fairly quickly. So let's take that up. The Vista Beam presentation caught the attention of both Commissioner Henning and myself. Who's here to make that presentation? Or are they coming on?
I am on Zoom.
Okay. If it would be more convenient and it wasn't too long, we could move you up, although perhaps if you're on Zoom, you're less sensitive to schedule. How do we feel about making that offer? How long a presentation you got?
It's going to be very short.
I have no objection. You want to make that?
That's a good idea. Move it to.
So we could throw that in. Well, I guess we could just bring it right in ahead of the applications for all of that. Although maybe those are the more important stuff. Staff, if you got a suggestion of where we wanted to move that, what would be an appropriate spot?
I'd probably do it after both the applications.
Okay. All right, we'll I guess it's a tentative amendment at this point, but we'll pencil that in for the moment there ahead of the current planning projects. Are there other amendments, rearrangements? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, carries. We have an agenda. Okay, first item is approval of the minutes of the first meeting, which is the November or the September 13th, I guess. So comments from anybody that looked through those?
I didn't have anything, Mr. Chair.
Nor did I.
Go ahead, just each time we do these, we can kind of doctor them up a little bit. There's a couple of just template things. It starts out, Chairman or the Secretary will call the roll. We don't really do that. I think you can settle for having those lead-ins. Just say, we called it to order, roll call. Well, here's who's here. We don't, it's technically not true that the Secretary called the roll. We need to do it that way. So that was just a tiny thing that'll make the template better. What else did I have here? Oops, well, this computer's decided to go bye-bye for the moment. I guess we'll let that slide. I think it was a small typo. If I find it, I'll point it out.
You can just email me.
Sure. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the September 13 minutes? We'll do these one by one.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second?
I second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Done deal on that. Okay, let's move to the next set of minutes. And on both of these, yeah, a nice set of minutes. So thanks for that. I particularly like the discussion of findings. I know it's been something I've been sensitive to, but I think you guys did a real nice job with those discussions on both these two sets of minutes. So let's look at the October 26th set. Anybody got anything they want to bring to our attention?
I didn't have any comments.
Neither did I.
And apparently neither did I. Okay. Motion to approve the The October 26th minutes.
I so move.
I second.
Second, moved and seconded, discussion, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we're on to conflicts of interest. Ms. Hanning,
I don't have any.
Mr. Platt,
I have no disclosures.
Hinckley, same here. So that will get us on to the Union Wireless Tower application, LUCT 0123. Who's presenting that this evening?
Alrighty. The applicant is the Union Telephone Company. The request is to approve a tower application for the installation of a 100-foot communication tower. The zoning is rural residential. Current use is vacant, and the property can be accessed off of Old Rock Quarry Road. There were some reviews. Luke Hawkins of the Fire District had no concerns. Rob Fisher of Roden Bridge had no concerns. Tracy Fletcher, treasurer, had no concerns. Holly Dyer, resource specialist for the Laramie Rivers Conservation District, had comments regarding the soils and erosion. Her full comments can be seen in the review section. Wyoming Office of State Lands, Tyler Sino, had no concerns. Game and Fish, Will Schultz, had comments about birds, lights, and grasses. His full comments can be seen in the review section. And Taylor McCourt of Wydot had no comments. Findings necessary for approval. Pursuant to the Albany County Zoning Resolution, Chapter 5, Section 9E, the Board of County Commissioners must make the following findings: that the proposed tower shall not adversely affect the public interest, that the applicant has provided a site plan with all requirements, and the applicant has adequately addressed the following possible impacts, and a statement that the applicant agrees to allow Albany County to install a communication antenna on the tower if feasible and if requested by Albany County. This shall not exempt the county from paying an appropriate fee, which we have received that. Staff analysis, the request is to install a 100-foot communication tower, and it will meet all the minimum standards of the tower application. Required documentation was provided. The proposal should have minimum impacts on the surrounding area. Findings of fact, the findings necessary for approval, applicant responses, and staff analysis referenced in this report are adopted as findings, reflecting that the applicant has adequately addressed the specified impacts, and the same are incorporated herein. Conclusions of law, the applicant is proceeding in accordance with and is in compliance with the requirements of the Albany County Zoning Resolution, and staff recommendation is to approve the Union Wireless Tower permit application, LUCT 0123, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Thank you. Questions for staff,
I have a question.
please?
Joe, under the co-location requirement given here, it reads the applicant must demonstrate there are no existing towers within the general region that will structurally, technically, or otherwise meet the needs of the applicant applying for the new tower, and there's a clear need for the erection of the tower.
Sure.
The applicant response is this tower design is capable of a minimum of 4 carriers. That doesn't make any sense to me at all as a
Sure.
response.
Yeah, I know that the tower closest to it, I don't remember where it is completely full. And I don't remember if that was in the application or not. But I have been told that.
The one behind us, sorry.
And maybe that's another question for the applicant. I know they have co-locators ready to go also, so.
I had the same question. There's the one right beside it there by Smite Range Academy, isn't there?
Yeah,
Yes,
So
yeah.
why do
it's
we?
pretty close by.
Yeah,
Well, and that doesn't concern me if in fact it's full, but this response concerns me. And my question to Matt would be, could we make it, accept this as a finding, the way it's worded for a response? Because, I mean, I question that. We're required to make a finding. The finding's gotta make sense.
Can everyone hear me? My name's Tyler. I'm with Union Telephone.
yeah, you're speaking on behalf of the applicant?
That is correct. I'm the person that has submitted this application. I work for Union Telephone, and although I guess the application narrative might be a little vague, we have done some research on that adjacent tower. It's approximately 1,600 feet to the west of the parcel that we're looking. And we do have a few concerns with that tower. One being the location. There is a variety of equipment on that structure. Currently in Laramie, we have deployed 3G technology. With some of the co-located equipment on that tower in a variety of locations, when we go to upgrade to LTE services, we have some concerns about PIM, which is an interference term, but interference issues with all the other antenna that is on that structure. There's also some issues. The co-location interest that's kind of helping us drive this project requires an 18-foot envelope vertically. And right now that tower is unable to accommodate that unless we were to go to an elevation on the tower low enough that would not be an interesting location for that co-locator. The other issue is that there's a bunch of trunk cabling, which is like power and fiber optic cable that is typically housed inside that monopole. And we have a feeling that that entire inside of the monopole is full because there's cabling that's connecting and ran vertically on that structure on the outside of the tower. So to say that the tower is full, that's kind of a debatable subject, if you will. But we know that with the union equipment that we would like to deploy, as well as the co-location equipment, we find that would be a difficult thing to do on that structure that is close to this location that we're seeking approval for.
So just to clarify, you have investigated that tower? However.
Yes, we have.
So how do we deal with your
Well,
very valid?
I'll just say, I've got no problems with the tower itself. I'm just concerned about the legality of this finding and our ability to make a valid recommendation, to the county commissioners, and whether that's a problem or not, which is why I directed that to Matt.
You've now heard an expanded applicant response. Go ahead, Mr. Gerch.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I think what we could do is amend our staff report and just under the staff piece, the staff comment, maybe we'll just add what we've heard at the meeting from Mr. Thole, that they've investigated the adjacent or the nearby tower and it's not going to meet their needs and therefore they need to build this new tower. And that way we could clear that up because the finding that they provided didn't really answer the question, right?
That's
so
exactly
so we could do that and then that would clean that up a little bit if that's kosher.
The other thing that union could do, we actually have a nice report prepared. It's a 2-page visual summary that kind of lines out some of these items that I've kind of talked about, and we would be willing to submit that as a supplement to the staff report if that might be something that would be helpful to help us kind of explain the need for this new structure.
That could be passed on to the board.
And that, why wasn't that part of the packet at this point? You had not submitted that question to the applicant?
And that's a mistake on my part. I think it quite possibly just could have been missed, but it is prepared and we have no problems adding that to our application.
Mr. Ayers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Platt, ultimately, these regulations for the tower permit are still under that kind of old standard that we've been going away from, which is that the applicant is adequately addressed. So the determination is up to the commission on whether you feel that that has been adequately addressed.
And we could take into account what we've just heard.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I would certainly request that there be that follow-up in writing in this case.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I was referring to earlier. I like the idea that we've added this as an affirmative comment from the staff to our findings rather than them just kind of floating out there. So that Commissioner Platt's question, I think, is absolutely on target. We are looking to staff to have evaluated those responses and affirmatively found them to address the concerns. In this case, they did not, but we have now received that input. So I guess what I just heard from Mr. Ayers, we could comfortably go forward with approving this based on this meeting with the understanding that the text will be supplemented by staff. Did I capture your advice appropriately?
Certainly, or the applicant as well.
Are there other things, Tyler, that you'd like to add to this to make it a complete package that we perhaps haven't seen?
I appreciate the question, Commissioner. I believe, with the addition of this document that I've kind of tried my best to explain, I don't think we have anything else to add unless there's any other questions from anyone in the room.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Platt, did you have something else?
No.
Ms. Hanning?
Yeah, I have a question for the applicant, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, let's go ahead with that.
Mr. Thole, the FFA determination that you wouldn't need a light on the tower, that it looks like it comes from like a self-serve app of sorts where you put in the information and you get an answer, but have you, am I correct in assessing it that way, that it's sort of a predictive tool but not the final say by the FFA?
It is a predictive tool, but it is very concise. If it's anywhere close to an area of concern, then that tool automatically kicks it to required review. And with the documents that we submitted, that means that it is comfortably outside of any problematic window of any FAA concern.
Okay, thanks for answering that. That's all I had. Thank you.
On the issue of the companion tower, the question to staff, what are our spacing requirements? I mean, is that an issue at all that we have these towers all kind of stacking up on the skyline? Certainly it happens Pilot Hill and adjacent topography. Is there a kind of a policy on lots of towers all in one spot?
Mr. Chair, that's not addressed in our regulations.
Okay. This question asks them to tell us about it, but we don't have any standards.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. While you're up there, Mr. Gertz, the staff report includes a statement about we don't need a variance. I think the SSI for the facility suggested they might need a variance. What's the thinking there? Or maybe that's a question for Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Joe, hang on one second.
I'm looking at the staff comment.
Yeah.
I think that I might be able to help shed some light on that.
Go ahead. We'll double team this, Mr. Thole.
As far as I'm aware, in the application and tower requirement application, that as long as your spacing from any adjacent parcel or property line is 1 foot per height of the tower, then a variance isn't required.
Okay, the actual statement that I was reading bears on SSIs and setbacks from vulnerable features rather than tower height.
Yeah, so in the zoning resolution, it talks about an SSI and a variance may be needed if it's within 100 foot of any vulnerable feature, but that's for wastewater. This is not wastewater and has nothing to do with wastewater. So
If I'm not
Need a variance.
structure.
Go ahead, Mr. Stoll, what's your question? Okay, yeah, I thought that's what your staff report meant. So just for our clarification, and this will bear on what we're gonna do with APOZ regulations later on. As I went back and read the existing regulations, am I correct that the only thing that requires a setback from vulnerable features are septic system?
I believe that's how it's written.
And the proposition that has been brought to us by our consultants for the cap is that that be extended to any development. Am I remembering that correctly?
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. Just, I say a little preview of coming attractions. That is all I had. Other comments, questions for either the applicant or staff? Hearing and seeing none. I saw you, the agenda suggested this was a public hearing. Are we having a formal public hearing on
Yes.
on this? Okay, so then we will, let us make it clear in the record that we are taking public comment under the rubric of a public hearing. Are there other comments on this application from the public in the room or on Zoom? Okay, seeing and hearing none, I'd like to close these public hearings by official motion. May I have such a motion?
I move to close the public hearing on the Union Telephone conditional use permit.
I second.
Okay, having been moved and seconded for the discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Done. Okay, what's, it seems like we know where this is going, but what's the pleasure to move forward with this?
I just have one additional comment.
Please do.
I noticed when I was looking at this, in the zoning resolution, that in the application submission, there's a part of the application submission is about co-location. And the answers we got here in the staff report make more sense to this application submission portion. And then separately, there is findings of approval. And so there might have been some confusion about which part was being addressed. At any rate, we can go ahead.
Okay.
You understand what I'm saying?
No, I'm not sure I followed
Yeah.
that.
Well, if you look at the applicant responses, and staff comment, it looks like they're addressing item 3 under the application submission in the zoning resolution,
Okay,
which is separate from the findings necessary for approval, where the
Oh.
wording is different.
okay.
And it makes more sense if you look at the first part, but
Good.
anyway, I just want to make that comment.
But you're satisfied that the
I'm absolutely
issue has been
satisfied, yeah.
addressed? Okay, no, fair point. And again, we should keep our ducks in the right row to the extent we can. Ms. Henning, anything? Okay, we're open to a motion to address this.
Well, I recommend the Board of County Commissioners approve the Union Wireless Tower Permit application LUCT-01-23, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in the staff report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Further discussion. Ms. Hanning, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Platt?
Yes.
Kokornik, Ben David absent. Hinckley votes yes. Unanimous. Thank you for the input we've gotten online, and you're welcome to proceed as per instructions from the planning office. Next item, Lang variance request, AR0123. Who's presenting our staff report here? Mr. Gertsch, looks like.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Commission members, this is an application for a variance from the zoning standards, particularly the small lot residential density standards. Mr. Larry Lang is the applicant. He's here in the room with us. So if you have questions for the applicant, he'll be here to help answer those. This is located at 26 Cedar Avenue in Centennial. Let's see, the current zoning, as I kind of mentioned, there was small lot residential. They're using the property has been residential property and was used for a structure that has I guess since burned down in a fire. But there's a notice provided for this application. They posted a sign. It was published in the paper, and mailings, certified mailings were provided to adjacent landowners. For a variance, there are a number of things that have to be addressed. First, the granting of variance will not be detrimental to the public health, safety, welfare, or material interest to other properties in the vicinity. The applicant responded that the granting of the variance to allow for a single-family home is consistent with surrounding properties. Staff would agree with that response. And I would add that there was a home previously on the property, but was lost in a fire. And this request allows the owner to use the property for what it was used for previously. Second finding that's necessary for approval, the granting of a variance will not constitute a grant of special privilege consistent with limitations on use of other properties in the district. The applicant responded that this approval would not be a special privilege and that the property owners are allowed a dwelling per parcel. There are technically 4 lots that identify 2 parcels for home sites. And I agree with that assessment as well. Maybe I'll back up just a second and give you a little bit more history on this property. This property is really interesting because there's actually 4 lots. They go like this. And it was condominiumized, meaning that there's 2 people that own technically the units on the property and not the land, but the homeowners association technically owns all that land. Within the condominium documentation, those 4 lots, it shows kind of an area like this and an area like this. So there's a north half and a south. Well, it's not really half, but they're north parcel and a south parcel, which didn't really get rid of the 4 other parcels. But there's a house that was up that's on the north parcel, and then the house on the south parcel burnt down. So that gives you a little more background on what we're talking about here and why this is weird.
It's in Centennial.
Yeah, right. So moving through this again. So another finding they have to make is the hardship, which is the basis for the variance. Application was not self-inflicted by the applicant. Obviously, the loss of the existing home was not due to the applicant's choices or anything. The applicant actually purchased the property after that was burnt down, and he cleaned up the property significantly. And then the fourth thing is there's actually the variance has to be justified for one or more of the following reasons. So one of those reasons is a strict interpretation or enforcement of the development standards would result in the practical difficulty or unnecessary physical hardship inconsistent with the purposes of this resolution. The strict interpretation of the zoning resolution would eliminate the use of this property for a home and betterment of the community. That was how the applicant responded. And staff also responded similarly that the property will lose its use for a dwelling without this variance. Also, exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the site of the variance that do not apply generally to other properties in the same district. So when the applicant responds, when the previous owner of this property created LaRue condominiums, that created an extraordinary circumstance. Staff responds, when these properties were turned into a condominium property, ownership of the 4 lots was transferred to a homeowners association. Technically, individual ownership is for the building on the property only, and the building to the north of the property, also part of the LaRue condominiums, crosses 4 lots. This eliminates the use of any of the existing lots for additional dwellings. And then the third thing under this, strict interpretation and enforcement of the development standards would deprive the applicant of privileges enjoyed by other property owners in the same district, where the variances will bring the applicant into substantial parity with other property owners in the same district. So the applicant responded, where all other property owners in the district are able to get a permit for a home, the property is currently not eligible for approval of a zoning certificate. Staff responded, this variance will provide an equal opportunity for the applicant, specifically where other owners of the other owner of the condominium property enjoys a single family home at this time. So I guess to bring this back, the variance is required because the unit on the north condominium parcel crosses all 4 lines, and so therefore takes away the use of any of the other ones. If there was another part where these 4 parcels existed, technically you could put a building on each of those parcels, but this kind of makes it all funky. So, but yeah, I feel like this variance has, the request meets all of the requirements. I know that there are some objections from property owners surrounding this property, and they may be here in the room or online. I'm not sure who exactly is here, but there were some folks that called our office just to make you aware of that. And so maybe they have more information that you want to hear and take into consideration. Is there any questions for myself?
David, did you take a look at the site yourself?
Did I go up there? I think we just looked at the maps.
Okay.
So
That's all.
I've been in the area multiple times, but I don't think I've been up there since this came in. So.
Ms. Annie?
I was just gonna ask about public comment because there weren't any written ones in the packet, but you say you have received some interest
Phone
from
calls.
people, so
Mhm. Yeah.
I'll sit tight to see if anybody has anything to say.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, unless you want to share the general content of those.
I think it'd be better if there's folks in the room that want to share their own comments.
So just in case.
So I don't want to misspeak since it was a telephone conversation.
Okay, no, I was just anticipation, and maybe I could bring you back if they don't show up. Maybe they're here. I just had a small typo that caught my eyes. I was reading through this I guess it's the 3rd page, the paragraph ending in district is reasonable to address this issue. We swap that word. See where I am. There's a 3-line paragraph at the bottom of that page, the one right above it. It looks like it's with me.
No.
I think it's the 3rd page. You don't have your pages.
Okay, I think I've got
Findings of fact, and then go up from that findings of fact.
In the staff analysis.
okay, in the staff analysis.
So it's the second to last paragraph of the staff analysis.
Okay.
It's probably just missing the word way.
It's just missing a word, way.
A reasonable way to address this issue.
How many sentences
The
down?
last sentence.
The very last sentence.
Well, I guess
Very last line.
if Mr. Wells has found it, I've just one less little
District.
crunch
Oh,
for
wait, yes, I found it.
the county commission.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thank you.
Small matter.
I've always got typos in this stuff, so I appreciate it.
That's just what
I'm sympathetic.
Oh, yeah. As we go along, we can all help one another out, just a smoother read. Okay, thanks again for a nice report and for including the staff analysis in response to the applicant's responses. Are there comments from this applicant? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and open a public
I'm
hearing.
Larry Lang, and if you got any questions, I'll be happy to address them.
Okay.
And also, if I can make a few comments.
No, please do. This is your opportunity
Okay.
to supplement the staff report with respect to your application.
If I can just give you a little background.
Sure.
We were fishing up here in 2019 and Susie caught her limit and I didn't. And she said, "Dear, we really like this. I think we ought to get a cabin up here." So we bought a couple lots up on the hill. And then my grandsons in 2000, they said, "Grandpa, we need jobs because of COVID." So we built a cute little cabin on the hill. Then Richard Guzzi, if anybody knows about Richard, he had a house that was, he was a dear man. I got to like him. But so I bought his house that needed renovation. And then Susie likes the historic architect. So she did a little homework and she found part of the house was the 1929 ice cream store in Centennial. So some of the neighbors wanted the bulldozer, and we decided to save the house. So we've renovated it, and I think it's kind of a community asset. So the neighbors came to me and he said, Larry, you ought to buy 26 in Cedar Avenue. That's a pile of burnt rubble, and we see what you do. We would really like you to buy that and clean it up and make it a community property. So I did. But as when I was buying it, I called the planning department and asked if it was buildable. And they said, yeah, but you're going to have to get a permit, which is fine. We did it twice before. So then the planning department did a little research and they found about this condominium puzzle, which I can understand why they did it, because the topography of the 4 lots, they, instead of a north-south alignment, they took it an east-west alignment and stepped the lots to get 2 building sites, which was a good idea. But what should have been done, instead of just condominiumizing the 4 lots, they should have replotted it into 2 old town plat lots. Then we wouldn't be here today. But they didn't. I mean, that's, you probably know the history of Centennial. So anyway, that's why we're here, and the planning staff has been really good to work with. They kind of figured out a way and to get there. So I bought a nice modular house to put on it, brand new, and so it'll look better than it did before. I can trust me, because I just don't do crappy work. Like I tell people, give me a bolt and a wrench and I'll hand you a bolt and a wrench back. Give me a 2x4 and a hammer and I'll build your castle. And that's kind of what I've done, and I'll make it a nice community. And some of the business people I got to know, and they said, Larry, we really need resident housing. So I can bring a structure in here and put in resident housing at very affordable price, because I bought a model monitor house that looks very nice. And I think the neighbors will be happy with it. At least Susie and I will be. And so that's kind of it. And I'd like to thank David for all his hard work, and hopefully we can move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just stand for questions for a moment. Anybody have?
I'm fine.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. I don't know if I can say the new word I've learned, condominiumization. It's a mouthful. Okay, so let us open the public hearing. Are there others who would like to address this proposal, online or in person? Okay, I return to my question, Mr. Gertz. You get to tell us what they told you, or if it's irrelevant, then you could say so, but if there were comments, perhaps they would be germane.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're relevant or not. One of them was worried about drifting of snow when they put the new building on the property, which, yeah.
Okay.
The other was just the closeness to the north property line. Apparently when the fire happened on that property, to the structure that was on the property before, it caught some of the other structure on fire as well. And so they just wanted to make sure that there was a bit of a setback from that property. So those are the 2 things that I remember from the
But the proposal is within the required setbacks from property lines. Well,
what he provided, it shows that there'd be 11-foot setback from the north property line. And yeah, as Joe was saying, that there in this vicinity, there is actually no setbacks.
I think it just occurred to me, I'm hearing echoes of city ordinances in my mind in terms of setbacks.
Yeah.
So do you require a survey?
Yeah, we will require a survey for this particular property because it's within the Centennial Plat.
So it don't wind up in the street.
Exactly. So that's fine.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, other public comments? Hearing, seeing none, I'm open to a motion to close public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Motion moved and seconded for the discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay.
Like to thank you.
Yes, and thank you for coming. And one moment, and you're excused right now if you'd like to see where we go with it. That's the next item on our agenda. So,
Mr. Chair, I recommend the Board of County Commissioners approve the Lang variance request VAR-01-23, adopting and incorporating the staff analysis, findings of fact, and conclusions of law as each are stated in this staff report.
And I'll second.
moved and seconded. Discussion of the motion. Hearing, seeing none. Ms. Hanning, what say you?
Aye.
Mr. Platt?
Aye.
Harnick absent, Ben David absent, Hinckley, aye. Motion carries. Thank you, sir. Good luck with your project, and you need not stay for the rest of our meeting, although you're welcome to. Okay, we moved Vista Beam up on our agenda, so that would be the next item. Do you want to introduce that at all, Mr. Gertz, or just turn them loose? What's your thinking there?
Yeah.
It's pretty much their show.
Yeah, so we were approached by Vista Beam. They're looking to do a tower for internet service up in the mountains. I don't know if I put where they said that was going to be. But apparently there's the property that they're looking at has a setback issue. And the variance process that's outlined in the tower permit requires that they do a study by an engineer saying that if there is in fact collapse of the tower, that it would not exceed or go off the property or go out of the lease area. This is very unusual to come to you at this point because we have not seen an application. We don't have any data or information about what the size of the tower is or anything to look at. So really, we don't have anything to really contribute because we haven't seen, what they're planning to do. The one thing I would say is we can't make a discussion. Nothing formal can happen because we don't have an application. So I think what they're doing is just trying to fill out where you guys might sit, I guess, on some of this stuff. But I think it's best probably just to hear from the tower company, just to be able to see what they want from you guys. But I guess don't commit to anything. So.
Okay. Pretty clear.
Well, I have one question.
But I had one as well, so go ahead, please.
Who actually put this on the agenda, or who asked to put this on the agenda?
Vista Beam.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess I felt we could accommodate them. That was.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I was just curious. No objection.
So, just while we're talking, the things that might need a variance, understanding we're not going to commit to them at all, are that relationship of height to setback. Is that?
Yeah, that's
okay. And so,
from my understanding of my conversations with Vista Beam, so
okay.
I don't think there's anything else there are questions.
Mr. Gertz, Mr. Chairman.
Go right ahead, please.
I'm trying to remember, was there another Union wireless tower that went in over by the Centennial, and they did a replacement tower? And did they need to enter into a lease with an adjoining property? Because I'm just trying to remember if somebody patched together more than one property to be able to accommodate the fall area of the tower? Am I remembering that wrong?
That doesn't sound familiar.
Sound right to me.
I mean, we've allowed, a lot of times what'll happen is like they have a lease area and it's like 100 by 100 for that. What we have allowed in the past is them to provide a bigger easement to accommodate. So it's not actually going on anybody else's property, but it's going outside the lease area, if that makes sense.
Right, okay.
So that has occurred.
So
Because it does the same thing, so.
That's actually kind of my recollection what David just said.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Wicker, are you representing Vista Beaminess?
Yes, I am the vertical asset liaison for Vista Beam. We were approached by the Walling sisters that own the property and offered their property as a site for a wireless internet service provider tower. We're proposing a self-supporting tower because when if they ever do collapse, they don't fall like a guide tower. They kind of just look like they're taking a nap. They kind of fold in half. And I don't want to take a whole lot of the committee's time. I just kind of want to get the opinion of the committee if we should proceed to apply for this variance because of the location and the size of this property. It is not big enough to meet the setback requirements. It is in a subdivision. There's lots of little roads, connecting this small subdivision. I know that there's different concerns with if there was a collapse of the tower and the tower crossed a roadway for people, that's a concern. So we have the engineer lined up to demonstrate how the tower that we are proposing to build, it's only 146 feet tall. This property is the best of what we could find in this area to serve this community because it is at a higher elevation. So just kind of wanting to get a feel for the committee on even moving forward on applying for this variance. We do not want to waste any resources or anybody's time.
All right, I guess we're going to deal with it in that kind of generic way. Questions for Ms. Wicker at this point? Concerns that they might keep in mind as they move forward? I guess we can.
I think they ought to make an application if they want to proceed.
What do the neighbors say? I mean, those are the kinds of things that we will obviously won't be interested in. So I don't know if you have answers to those or some thoughts on those, but I guess just speaking for myself, were an application to come forward, we would of course want to apply our standards as best we could, and we would look to our staff to give us their very best advice. The kinds of things that we would worry about are the ones that are in the ordinance, regulation about what is the impact on the neighbors. Do you have any thoughts on that might be showstopper?
We have no problem. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, have you gotten any feedback from the neighbors?
No, we have not. We have just been talking to the Walling sisters that own the property. We have talked to the fire department, and they are lacking in communication. And so we were offering to provide them space, co-location space on the tower at no cost to help the emergency services and their communications as well. Can we go forward with the application to gather all of this information, and then once we're at a certain point, can we then, once it gets down the road a little bit further, then shell out the $5,000 to prove how the tower is going to collapse if it ever did? Is that something that we can do?
You can always work with the planning staff to go forward. Do we have any precedents for this idea of collapsing towers? I know we've heard that before. I guess I'm looking at Mr. Gertsch. Just generically, is there precedent for relaxation of the tower tipping over standard by virtue of a different tower design?
I mean, that's not something that we've really addressed. I mean, the only, we do have precedent of folks doing the engineering design and showing how that tower would fall if it did. I believe they do actually have designs. Okay, I guess maybe I'm getting to your question, but they do have designs where they make a part of the tower more vulnerable to, so that they fall in a certain way, right? Like,
Or they bust
they're
in the
weak
middle,
or
right?
something.
We saw.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess the way I would answer what their Emily is trying to ask is if we get an application and you do the variance process and it shows that it's going to be within the area that you're doing this in and it's not going to cross property lines, you know, you've got a pretty good chance of it going through, right? I mean, as long as there's not any huge issues. I mean, that's what staff will help do, is to make sure that these issues get worked through before we come to this point. We just haven't done that yet, so.
Okay, but conceptually, one could make an engineering argument that would potentially satisfy folks that it.
Absolutely, yeah. If an engineer wants to put his license on the line and say that this is what's going to happen, then we're gonna take that for what they say.
So that is going to require some output from the applicant to conduct such a study, but it sounds like that's inevitable if there is an avenue to a variance. It would be one that is well informed technically. So yeah. I think that sounds about the best we can do for you, Ms. Wicker. And the path forward is pretty clear. As we heard from the previous applicant, planning staff certainly ready, willing, and able to work with folks to find the most productive path forward. And then if you were to bring to us a well-substantiated request for a variance, there's no reason, again, generically, why it couldn't be granted.
All right. I thank you so much for your time tonight. We will proceed with the application process.
Okay. Thank you for showing up. We'll all learn something here about towers before we're done. Okay. That gets us back to current planning projects. And first up there are amendments to the plating and subdivision regulations with respect to subdivision access. So let's hear about that.
Yes, so this language was brought to you guys on September 13th, and it was put out for public comment to be potentially approved tonight. We haven't received any public comment, and it is our recommendation that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve and certify to the Board of County Commissioners these amendments to the Albany County Planning and Subdivision Resolution.
Fair enough. We've kicked it around. Commissioners, any further questions for staff? Have you had a chance to go through this? Any second thoughts?
Mr. Chair, so you haven't gotten any public comments? I think somebody here from the paddocks is here maybe, but our hope is that this amendment would help to prevent future subdivisions from having the one ingress egress out of a community issue that the paddocks is experiencing right now. And that so did the fire district ever look at this and get back to you at all?
It was sent to them. They never got back to us. So.
Okay, thank you.
I take that as they accept these changes.
Okay.
So
I know that they were in approval of the direction we were going. So, but we can be specific about this.
Well, this is responsive to some of the comments we've heard from them, obviously, in the past on various things. If there's no more from staff, we could open the public hearing. So going once, going twice. We don't have anybody online. Anybody in the attendance want to speak to this one?
I think it's a good thing.
Okay, we have one public comment. And it's never inappropriate to say good job instead of just what's wrong with what we're doing. All right, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Moved and seconded to close the public hearing. Further discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Okay, commissioners, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend for approval this amendment to the Albany County Commissioners. This amendment to the Albany County Planning Subdivision Resolution concerning access.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. I just had a procedural comment there. For the staff report, planning staff recommend that these amendments be approved. I mean, officially what we're doing, was the language of the motion correct? We are certifying these to the board for their consideration. Is that the
Correct, yeah.
Yeah. Right, then the motion appears to be in order. Further discussion of that. Let's take a vote. Ms. Hanning.
Aye.
Mr. Platt.
Aye.
Kokornik and David absent. Hinckley, aye. And we have a recommendation to move forward to the board. Thank you. Next up is fencing. No, sorry, accessory dwelling standards. So, Mr. Courage.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, commission members. So this is another project we've been working on for a while now. This went out for the appropriate review time. And we're here for a public hearing and potential decision. Staff's recommendation is certify approval to the Board of County Commissioners. And if there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those or move on to the next part.
Comments, questions for staff?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just my usual question. You didn't hear anything from the public on this one?
Have not, no.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Harris, you had something to add to that?
Yeah, I will say that I was recently shared with a copy of a super early stages bill draft from the state legislature that they will be taking up accessory dwelling units for counties and cities, possibly in the next legislative session, to where this may be forced on counties and cities throughout the state. So not a bad thing that we're getting ahead of it.
That's remarkable. Okay, my only comment was one I'd made before, just a point of clarification for the record, that the dwelling unit densities that we achieved were one to take advantage of these new regs would fall within the existing minimum lot sizes.
For all the residential, yes.
Yes. Okay, I think we had clarified that before, but I think that's an important point. It's almost to say they could have done that in the first place.
Right.
Okay, so I had no objections or further comments. So we'll open an official public hearing. Again, would our public like to weigh in on this one?
I was interested in this one, but I think so.
Okay, going once, going twice. We have nobody online. Motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on the accessory dwelling unit standards. Ms. Henning, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Platt?
Aye.
Kokornik absent, Ben David absent, Hinckley votes aye, and we can move that forward to the board. Thank you all.
Wait a minute.
Close the hearing. Mr. Chair, I move to recommend to the Board of.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Who closed the public hearing?
I'm sorry.
Who motioned on the public hearing part?
More than
Oh.
Hanning.
Really?
I thought.
I thought you.
Mr. Platt,
first and I
she
seconded.
seconded. Okay, I'm sorry.
Another question, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Did we ask your name, sir? We, just for the record, since
Oh, I'm Justin Christensen.
Justin, I know you've been to our meetings before.
I've done the paddocks thing, but I was here more for that accessory dwelling thing.
Oh, okay,
For a
good.
client of mine, I'm not, I'm not their legal counsel or anything, but I'm very interested.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I apologize for not doing that formally. We were kind of in an
Yeah,
informal
no,
nature there, being our public. A heavy burden, you represent the public back there. All right, now I did jump the gun. I appreciate the correction. We're just moving right along here. All right, we're open to a motion on the building standards.
Since we've been taking turns,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move that we recommend to the Board of County Commissioners approval of Amendment ZA-01-23, the what do we call them? The
Accessory dwelling
accessory
standards.
dwelling standards.
Can you certify that to the board?
Yeah, I think I said that in there somewhere.
Okay.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded, not only to close the public hearing, but to certify the document forward. Ms. Henning,
Aye.
Mr. Platt,
I,
Kokornik absent, Ben David absent, Hinckley, aye, and we are now done with that item. We are just voting up a storm this evening. Okay, that brings us to fencing. Now, we had some discussion of that at previous meetings, and Commissioner Ben David has spent a lot of time working on it. I think is what had brought forward the document. Thanks, see you later. That's attached. Do we want to continue to give Commissioner Ben David opportunity to weigh in on this? If I'm remembering correctly, this was brought to us through Mr. Ayers' office, in that the state statute had recently changed, and we were catching up with them. The suggestions that have been made were to go on beyond that. And Mr. Gersh, maybe you could let us know where we are. You've been working with Murav on the language that we've seen in front of us today.
Well, I think Matt and Rob have been the ones that have
Okay.
been communicating. So that's,
So this was tabled at the September meeting, maybe?
Right.
Because both Matt had questions for Mirav, and so did you guys. And so that's why it was tabled. Unfortunately, she's not at this meeting, so I don't know.
Well, maybe Mr. Ayers, what's your sense of the urgency of this? I mean, the law is the law, and people have to comply with it. So it isn't like something's happening in our absence of action, is there?
Well, so the law requiring, as part of the subdivision permit process, that, there be the plans for the fence submitted, with the application that went into effect July 1st. So that is in effect. But, there's the way that statute calls it out, it just has to be, a legal fence under the statutory definition, which is, pretty much just 3-strand barbed wire fence with T-bars or some sort of. So it wouldn't be wildlife fencing. So I guess that would be the impetus. But but have you received a subdivision permit application since this has gone into effect?
We have one.
No, there's one. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear
We
that.
have one.
we have one application that's went into effect since July
Oh,
1st.
okay. The questions for staff. Let's proceed through that step at least. I had a few. Standing, Mr. Platt.
I just have one comment. I noticed one, is typo, which I can point out.
Well, let's go ahead and pick those up while we're here.
On what is labeled as page 610, I guess, 6-10 zoning resolution. This is section 8 perimeter set fences, sub item A, or however you want to call it. In the last sentence, it says vertical wire stays are prohibited. Next last sentence.
Must be stays.
It should be stays.
Yeah.
The wire shall conform. Anyway, it stays to stays. That was the rat I saw.
Okay.
No.
Ms. Hanning?
I don't have any questions.
Mr. So the language being offered to us there at 8 is basically a recitation of the state statute. Is that?
No, that is more of a recitation from that wildlife friendly fencing design booklet provided by the Wyoming Wildlife Friendly Fence Foundation.
Okay, that's all. Oh, I see. Okay, I was looking at the the red line. So 8 comes back up here at the bottom. We have 2 section 8s. Get that right?
Yeah, there are two.
Okay, all right, then that's just my confusion. I'll have to sort that out. So paragraph 8, section 8. The first reference to it is I guess paragraph 8 of what? I look at the red line that came in the packet. It starts out with the number 8.
Yes.
And that's the piece that I was suggesting is mostly just the statute. Then there's a section 8 below that.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
there we go.
Yeah. So section 8 is the statutory language.
The first piece.
The first 8. Sorry, that 8 fencing.
Yeah.
So that's the statutory language.
And was there any provision in statute for O&M requiring somebody to build a fence? We all know that fences require maintenance, and was the state statute silent on that? Or is it assumed that the person who put it up is obligated to maintain it? How does that work?
Oh, so yeah, that there are specific statutes about that. For like cost sharing and who can make a call on kind of contribution for costs of establishment and maintenance. That is something that the county should not be involved with. So
Okay. There are other state statutes that get into that.
that's between private landowners.
Okay.
And we just really all we need is just how are you going to pay for this in the first instance?
And whether it meets our design standards if these were to go forward. Question for Mr. Gertsch. There was a brief discussion. Examples of the subdivisions that we've approved in recent times. I'm trying to get a handle on who all would be affected by this. I'm thinking most of them.
Anyone.
Everybody. But I mean, there is a way to get out of it. They can go to all their neighbors, and if they sign off, say, yeah, we don't care about the fence, then they could go forward without a fence. But if one of them doesn't, then we still do the fence. So,
Yeah, that took me a lot of research to come up with the answer that really any land you can legally run at large livestock. There's no prohibition on
So
that.
unless you were, say, surrounded by other subdivisions or something, would be a situation where it might not apply. Well,
Oh, like
You have to get signatures.
if they already had a fence, maybe.
yeah.
Or adjacent to lands by which, no, because I mean, even if you were subdivided, we have no prohibition against livestock
In
in any zoning.
Okay.
And there's no state standard upon which, so, I mean, we're a fence out state, so.
So basically, this new rule would apply to any subdivision that has come to us.
Yeah, you can put as many cows on 1 acre as you want.
Yeah.
As long as it wasn't prohibited use.
And then something like the filings of the paddocks. How does that work? At what point is it in the preliminary plat that the fencing requirement triggers?
Oh, so this was part of, did we put this in the final?
I
or-
think it's a preliminary plat, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the preliminary plat.
Yeah, I believe we put this at the preliminary plat stage. Chapter 611, yeah.
I mean, that's a good question though, because we've already done the preliminary plat for the paddocks. So if they come in with another, then would it apply or not? Because it's,
Yeah.
you missed that step, right? or it's past that.
On its face, the statute would say yes, when you build the subdivision is when
Yeah.
you become.
So, and actually, I mean, they already have this obligation for the perimeter fence. That's always existed. The thing that's new now is that the county has to check it off.
We have to require the plans as part of our subdivision permit, instead of it being a statute that private landowners have to deal with and not us. Right?
And the cost would just go into their normal thing, which is turned in.
Oh, yeah, their
So-
improvement.
So the preliminary plat would have to include their plans for doing this, and then they would actually have to build it when they came to the zoning certificate. So,
Or the subdivision.
okay,
Subdivision improvements
Before they
sold
sold lots, I believe.
okay. Well, like, it sounds like the sense is that we'll table this, but we won't do that formally. What was the sympathy of the commissioners in attendance for these much more focused regulations with respect to wildlife? Any general thoughts?
I'm happy to see wildlife friendly fences. I mean, just for what I do, I hate to come across one of these 4-strand fences that's got no slack and, personally trying to get by.
If you were to
And
try
the one
jumping
thing-
one, I'd like to see.
Yeah, and then one thing I have seen, I guess we've probably all seen on 287 with those fences, dead antelope. They wander into an open gate and they almost invariably get killed because they can't get back out. So, I don't see who'd be opposed to that. Have more wildlife friendly fences that can be managed by the wildlife.
Yeah, I guess I had some reservations about, I'd like to maybe understand the costs a little bit more, and if there's some places where it's more appropriate than others. I looked at the diagram and it's in the language suggests that on a slope, the height of the fence has to be different. If you stuck with the 42-inch effective height, we first have to define what effective means. So that would need to be changed in our definitions. But I'm looking at their diagram of the 50% slope. And if you knocked off the 42 inches, your fence would only be 7 inches high was all I got that was left. So I think there's some geometric issues here that would have to be worked through, and we would have to define what effective height meant.
An athletic cow.
Yeah, I think that most of them could manage a 7-incher. And then I certainly share that our interest in wildlife friendly fencing. And wildlife is an important part of Albany County. We need to protect that. It's just a question of whether, say, the fence between the Rocky Ridge and the Rocky Hill subdivision needs a full-scale wildlife friendly fence. Are there places where one could default to the state statute, which is the floor, without compromising wildlife in a significant way? So what do we want to do with this? It sounds like there's sentiment for pushing it off.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, yes,
yeah,
sir.
and really that was my question for Commissioner Ben David is, there is a host of design options outlined in that guidance document. So, why are we at just the 2 buck and rail and then 3-strand? Maybe because I'm sure it'll be costly, but I think just a 3-strand barbed wire fence is already pretty costly. So
There is that provision though that they can say, hey, we don't want to do this and this is why, right? Like you've got the 2 standards, but then there's an option to provide another option, like another set of plans to us for approval.
yeah, which is just that as effective. Well, this would kind of
This wouldn't have
this
allowed
would
the
take
other types.
this would take that away. Essentially, this would just say you have that higher standard. But we could incorporate something that, another, like in statute, it says 3-strand barbed wire fence something else, and then any other fence made out of any materials which is shown to be as effective at preventing breaching livestock. So it's very open-ended in that capacity. So something like that can always be added to this.
Yeah, like an electric fence, I would assume would be the first candidate for something that,
And that's an option in that booklet. There's like,
yeah.
it's in there, so.
Right.
All right, well, we don't need to formally not take action. Mr. Kurtz, go ahead.
I guess the one thing I might bring up as an option is, you know, it would be nice that our regulations mimic what the state statute says. I mean, we could go ahead with that section 8, that subsection 8 or whatever, and move forward with that, because that's just adding that statutory language. Or if we want to keep discussing this and kind of figuring out that wildlife piece, we can come back. But I don't know, I just want to throw that out as an option just to get that on the books, and then we can keep discussing if we wanted to. Or I guess I don't really care, because we will fall back to statutes. I mean, I guess I do care, because it would be nice to have them the same. But
Yeah, I mean, we're doing that with the aquifer stuff. I felt kind of two minds. On one hand, let's change the zoning and then leave it for a while, instead of, if you want to know the latest, you have to look every week. I mean, there is,
sure,
I think, an argument against changing resolutions too frequently. So I think there's two sides to your coin. Thoughts, fellow commissioners, one way or another?
Actually, here's something I don't have anything really to contribute.
Okay, I'm happy to just let the thing slide, and let state statutes rule.
yeah.
I guess maybe we could come prepared at the next regular meeting to go to hearing one way or another, whether Commissioner Ben David is here or not. That we could, like, we'll give it one more chance for her to be here so we can discuss, or not. I don't know. I'm.
Is there a way to tease out public comment? I gotta believe this would get some comment were it brought to the attention of the developers. Any sense of that? Are they aware that we're thinking about this, or could they be made aware, or is that their problem if they aren't aware?
You know, I don't know if we went out and really asked anybody. That's something we could probably do. Just like, I'm sure that they're not all like, oh, what is the state doing? Oh, they changed the statutes on fencing, you know? I mean, who does that? We do. Besides that.
Well, yeah.
And us, we try to keep up to, but on that. But we could send it to engineering firms and some folks that work with developers, and maybe some of the developers, and see what their thoughts are. I mean, we'd be happy to solicit.
I mean, I hate to take on the affirmative burden of coaxing out public comment, but I guess I really would like to hear what people have to say on this, on whom that burden would fall.
What about Game and Fish? Would they comment on it?
Oh yeah, possibly. I mean, I don't know. The one guy, there's been some turnover up there, and they weren't as happy to help us out as they were in the past. So
We actually got a lot of comments in the last week.
have you?
Yeah, no, it looks
Oh,
like
really?
they got some fresh blood there.
Somebody got finished.
Someone's active.
Yeah, because I had a guy call me. He was the new head of whatever this department is, habitat prevention or whatever. I don't know. That's not prevention, not prevention. Habitat something. But he was like, why do you guys keep sending us stuff? And I was like, well, we've been doing it for like 15 years, at least as long as I've been here, you know. But I think we kind of talked through it, and he was like, okay, yeah. It's like, we just want to make sure you guys know what we're doing, and we love your comments. If you guys don't want to comment, you don't have to. But I don't know. I think he was just new on the job. Maybe just didn't. Maybe it was too much too. Like, why does everybody keep sending this?
One of the things that you've, I think, quite usefully presented to us is what other counties are doing. I guess I wouldn't mind having these guys spend a little time kind of informing this discussion in terms of how you think the burden would fall. Does that sound reasonable?
Sounds reasonable.
Is it a tractable request?
Sure. I know that the other county planning offices hate
Hate
this. I can tell you that already. Had some meetings and they were really vocal. They just did not like it. So.
Teton has these standards,
Yes.
which are pretty much like buck and rail. So that's gonna be.
Yeah, yeah.
That's for
That's
them
Teton for
To
you.
live there.
for their
so.
rural western character.
Yeah, well,
Another way to encourage affordable housing in Teton County.
so your colleagues, I guess you guys had your convention here just recently, and it's just that you don't want to have to impose fencing requirements on your subdivision applicants.
Well, there's a thought that this will completely shut down.
No one's gonna want to do it.
Subdivisions.
Yeah.
It'll make it too costly.
expensive.
But they already had to.
Well,
But yeah, they have to do, well, like lobby their legislators, that's
Yeah.
always a refuge.
Now when someone's gonna say, you wanna do this subdivision, you have to do this, turn in these plans, you're gonna have to put it up. That's different than having it in statute and nobody cares, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I understand.
well, yeah, the legislatures, it's imperfect, as is everything. All right, is that further comments on that? Sounds like Mr. Gertz is willing to give us a little bit of feedback. I guess I'll take the assignment of talking to Miss Van David. Let's find out what her situation is in general, as well as in terms of this specific thing. I don't know what's going on, but she has informed us of her potential absence in times past.
Yeah, I mean, the last meeting, I do remember a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks before the meeting, she asked if there was gonna be a Zoom link, and I said, yeah, we'll send it
Yeah.
out right before, and that was the last time I think I heard from her, so. Well, hopefully everything's okay, I guess.
Okay, so that one's to be continued.
Do we need to formally?
I don't think we need to, I don't think we need to formally not do anything, because, yeah, there's no motion was made, it wasn't an application, so
No action.
that's just
Yeah, then everyone table
that's just something to talk about. Okay, now the signs, let's talk about the signs.
We did find a little smaller item.
We have a staff report, and I have some comments on this when we get to them. But
So, we had discussed this a few months back. I think that there were a few comments, specifically, the Planning and Zoning Commission requested sort of a luminance standard for lighted signs. And then David also requested that I remove the portions relating to renewal of sign permits, because apparently those had been renewed at some point, but came back into the zoning resolution through some sort of version control issue. So essentially, with the exception of the standard that I wrote in where the luminance of illuminated signs shall not exceed 60 nits at night, with 1 nit equal to 1 candela per square meter. I learned about the science of illuminations.
I was gonna ask what a nit was besides a baby louse.
Yeah. Yeah, nit is, I guess, how you measure the amount of light that signs give off, or like computer screens actually as well. So that was fun. But that's, yeah, so that's what I added. Otherwise it's essentially, I think that we actually didn't we up the sizes a little bit for permitted signs? Yes. So I think for permanent signs, we increased, maybe it was temporary signs, we increased some of those. The signs requiring a permit, we increased some of the sizes for the height and square footage of the sign face. But otherwise, it's the same structure as was before you prior, and I mean, either way, I think we need to move forward on this or just get rid of the sign regulations because they are facially unconstitutional and have been for a while.
So
You said they're facially,
unconstitutional because they're content-based regulation. So they're under the federal United States Constitution, First Amendment to the United States Constitution.
okay.
They are.
So let's just have a general discussion of this, and then if there's specific amendments that sound reasonable, and I would go to that very point. My question reading this thing was, why are we doing this? Is there a problem we're solving here? And I don't mean to fall to the trope of ain't broke, don't fix it, because a lot of things need maintenance. But what I understood from our past discussions is that the thing that's wrong is what Mr. Ayers just identified. And it's content-based speech, and that's forbidden. If that was all we were correcting, that would be quite simple. There are relatively few places the word political shows up once. There's some odds and ends about the content of it. I struck me that this was a much more comprehensive overhaul than simply what is necessary to meet content neutral regulation. Am I misunderstanding that?
Yeah, pretty much like all of that exempt sign that was previously in there. That's all content based.
Okay. And
So
now-
under the former, what's on there now where it says general requirements general requirements is okay, but then the exempt signage, real estate signs, that's commercial speech, which is content. Political campaign signs, that will,
that was
that's
the obvious.
a nightmare. Special event signs, that's a nightmare. What is that? The special event, that's either commercial or probably political, possibly, religious even. Official federal, that could be cleaned up. Advertising, where you say signs directing traffic but bearing no advertising, that's content based. Memorial or historical plaques, content based. Temporary decorations, content. So yeah, no, pretty much the entire.
Okay, let's talk about the changes that Mr. Gersh shared with us. What is there in sizes and numbers of signs that's content based?
Nothing. It's time, place, and manner regulation.
Those are the things that caught my attention. Things like in agricultural zoning, you're allowed for on-premise signs. Which exactly, but we have in these regulations, we have the number of signs is limited.
Yes. So that's basically how you can regulate signs, is it has to be by zone and then by size.
So, yeah, and just to add, like, this was created by someone in your office, right?
Yeah.
The intern or whatever, and then Matt and I have kind of been, and Joe, been kind of working through it, but.
So, yeah, I mean, we're not married to any of these numbers
sizes.
or sizes. It's more just that this is the structure that it would need to take in order to have sign regulations.
And some of the changes that I made were kind of based on some of the research I'd done on other codes that I recommended to Matt. So, but yeah, these all can be tweaked. So.
Well, all right. So again, chime in here. Invitation of my comrades. I just think the whole regulation of signs is problematic in a lot of ways. What is a sign even? If I have a big sign in my building and I write "Eat at Joe's" on it, that becomes a sign and is regulatable. But if I paint it with leopard spots, it isn't. What if I fill it with a pattern of vote for Trump stickers? I mean, I see that kind of thing. You're distinguishing words from just colors and patterns. What's the sense of that? It seems like it's an aesthetic thing pretty much, and the number of signs. If I've got a 20-acre plot and I want to fill it up with little yard signs, why does that fall under our authorization to look after the health, safety, welfare, and morals of the county?
Because it's a structure.
I mean, we can, but why would we want to? I'm much more sympathetic to using our zoning resolution to to control off-site impacts, particularly things like air and water pollution, light pollution, noise, traffic. This strikes me as moving off in the spectrum towards the kind of thing that is typically covered by subdivision covenants, where they say your house has to be earth toned and spectral fences. So I guess I'm fishing around here for just some of the philosophical basis for this level of sign regulation.
Right.
Completely agreeing with Mr. Ayers that time, place, and manner is the standard, and anything content based is unacceptable.
I mean, I guess what I would say is, the premise behind regulating signs is every, just like all of our other zoning rules, we're trying to create a community that, people want to be in, people enjoy being in, where there's not nuisances, where there's not, things that are impacting other people. I think the bigger issue to me, like when it comes to signage, is the billboards. A lot of people don't like billboards. They think they're cluttering up the highways and distracting from your community. So ultimately, we're just trying to regulate signage in a way that it's not going to create this big mess. If people have signs all over their properties, and I don't know, some people don't like that, and so we have to think about those other people that don't like those types of impacts. But I mean, every community, and not every, but like the majority of the communities I know, they have sign regulations. Whiteout has sign regulations. This is not like something that's out of the ordinary, and most zoning codes have these. And does it have an impact on people? Yeah, I mean, just like,
Yeah, there are studies on the effects of, signs and distracted driving on roadways.
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, you brought up light impacts, illuminated signs, grid light impacts.
Speaking strictly for myself, the language about flashing signs and rotating signs, and I have some sympathy with that, but it kind of falls in my rubric, because that's kind of reaching out and grabbing somebody, rather than me driving down the road. And say billboards are kind of in a special class because they are so big and they are so obtrusive. But
Right.
But to say agriculture, commercial, industrial, no bigger than 4x8, small residential, rural, all the residential ones, a 3-foot by 3-foot sign, 2 signs per property. I'm just kind of glancing down through my comments here. An agricultural zoning district, if I own a 500-acre tract, I get 2 signs. Is that the way one would read that? That just seems that this is too much for my taste, again, purely my own opinion.
I don't have a problem with this. I mean, I think it's what Mr. Harris said about them being structures. I mean, that they're, and also I'm just thinking back to the South Laramie, where it's such a mix of residential that's commercial, and there was that lawyer who wanted to put a sign up on a property. And so she came in to do a zone change to make it commercial so she could have her sign, and the neighbors didn't want the sign. I mean, so I think signs matter to people. And I kind of think what you've come up with here is reasonable when you think about them as structures that impact people, or could come flying loose in a windstorm, or block your view, and be like a sort of a nuisance to look at. So I didn't get into the nitty-gritty of numbers of signs, but I think it's reasonable to want to regulate them. I think about all the people who are upset about tumbleweed wanting to do a sign. And you just have these smatterings of like commercial things that are in the middle of residential areas. Like, isn't there one commercial lot somewhere up in the Casper Aquifer overlay I don't know, if you look at the zoning map, there's like one commercial. So it's just the way we're zoned around the county. You don't just, it's not all neat and like all the commercial is in one area. It's like it's a little bit everywhere, and so I don't have a problem with these. But I mean, I understand you might feel it's like going overboard.
Okay. What about the walls? Again, I'm trying to kind of picture in my mind how you'd implement this. My notion of if I have a big steel building sitting there, this would tell me that I cannot write on the side of it. It becomes a sign, the wall of my building. Right?
Yeah, you can write, you just have to get a permit to do it. I mean,
okay. And what are the criteria? What?
I mean, this sign is defined, right? Or sign
Yeah,
face.
any,
and
so
content
sign
or whatever.
any object, device, display structure, or part thereof that is used to attract attention of the public using words, letters, figures, designs, symbols, fixtures, colors, illumination, projected images, etc., which is capable of being observed by the public from public places, including sign face and sign structure. So, you know.
So a zebra striped building would qualify as a sign. I zebra striped it because I thought it would get people's attention. So what are the criteria for issuing the permit?
The criteria. So,
What is it? What do we have to find to give them one of these permits that they're required to get?
So it wouldn't go through planning and zoning at all. It would all be David. And administrative is just like a zoning certificate.
But what are the?
So you have your general requirements, which is, you know, the illumination aspects.
So
It can't revolve or otherwise move in any fashion. No sign shall be located within a publicly dedicated right of way. No motor vehicles or trailers of any kind, except those trailers manufactured with a sign face permanently attached, shall be used as a mobile sign. And then you get into, depending on what zone you're in and what are the constraints on that, and also whether it's a temporary sign or a permanent sign.
They have to show us that they meet these.
So yeah, so like, let's take, for instance, it's gonna be a permanent sign. They're gonna do it in commercial. What we would look for is, so they can have a maximum of 6 permanent signs with sign faces larger than 2 square feet, not exceeding 100 square feet.
And those are allowed as of right without a permit.
The permanent signs?
Their signs allowed as of right,
Oh,
which include permanent signs and temporary signs.
right.
And then there are certain permanent signs which require a sign permit.
So what we would do is we'd say, okay, you need to turn in, this permit, and on the permit, you need to show the design of the sign. So it's gonna be, let's say it's 50 square feet it's gonna be a sign that's on a pole, and it's gonna be less than 25 feet. And they would turn it into us. We'd look just to make sure it's like, oh, yep, it's less than 100 square feet for a sign face or whatever it is. And then it's going to be less than the 25 feet is measured from the center line. And they say, boom, here's your permit. Go ahead and put up your sign.
So if I'm in a rural small lot urban residential zoning district and I want to paint something on the side of my building, it cannot exceed 4 square feet. Is that right?
If it fits the definition of a sign
Well, everything fits the definition.
from a public place.
Okay.
Those street is public place.
I mean,
All right. I'm trying to find an extreme example because that's where we find the edges of the application of it. But the way I read that, if I want to get creative with my building, I'm limited to 4 square feet. That seems too much to me.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
getting away from an extreme example, I don't have any special expertise or knowledge about sizes and numbers of signs which would fit for various zoning districts. And I certainly trust our staff to have researched that and come up with good proposals for that. And that's something which certainly could be changed in the future if we decided, or the county commission decided need to be changed. But just as a general comment from traveling around the country, there are huge stretches of the country which is plain ugly because it looks like pretty much anything goes with signs. And that is not the way it is for the most part here in the county. For the most part, we are uncluttered by signs. There maybe some of the fireworks signs down the south part of the county are a little bit different, but and I think that's valuable. And I would hate to see strictly, anything goes type policy for the county. I think that'd be hugely detrimental. But that's aesthetics, and that's just my opinion.
Well,
There's no right or wrong.
no, we were appointed to render our opinions.
Yeah.
Okay, further discussion. And then if someone would like to, I haven't got specific amendments to propose at this point, I'll concede. But we are a quorum, we can act on this, Mr. Gertz.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, maybe I have a question. So I'm trying to get at what you're trying to understand, get my head around what you're saying. I mean, is there something in our sign definition that we need to change? I mean, what are you planning on painting on the side of your house? I mean, because the definition pretty much, like you said, it kind of includes everything. As long as you're trying to attract the public, I mean, there's some places in town that I could point out that I probably won't because it's not, I don't know why they did that to their homes, but that are meant to attract attention of people. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to. What are we trying to get here? Because I'm not tied to anything. I don't know if Matt's tied to anything here.
If you did a mural, would that count as a sign?
Well, I mean, to have something that's intent-based strikes me as it's problematic. If you're going to hang your hat on with the intention of attracting public attention.
I mean, that's kind of a saving feature in my opinion, because that was already in the definition, which was there, which is designed, intended, or used to advertise or inform, which that definition had to be stricken because advertise, that's content based. So this was, I mean, I looked around, David provided me a planner's dictionary that had a bunch of different examples. And I mean, this was the best one that I found in there for the definition of sign. And the intent could actually be saving. So a mural on the side of your, well, I mean, that could also, you could just, that's for me. That's for my own personal.
If you're doing it for yourself and you're not trying to attract people to visit your home, come do business at your home, then it seems like it wouldn't be thought of as a sign. Then it's just like, this is my version of beautifying my house for myself.
Or your zebra striped house.
Right.
That's because of your own personal affinity to zebras.
Okay, I mean, that would lay a burden on whoever's applying this to say, well, did they do that to attract attention?
Well, it also gives David a little bit of discretion.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to presume that most cases are made obvious, but there will be some cases maybe which are to our judgment, which aren't obvious.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe fall between the cracks.
And if you can write a code that stops short of the extremes,
well, okay.
you have a future in legal career. I don't think any lawmaker has ever been able to do that in the history of civilized society.
And we should not assume that everybody will take it completely to the extremes, but I'm reminded of a discussion that Mr. Gertz brought to our attention with respect to moving the APOZ boundary, that he was reluctant to open that up to other than the property owner by virtue of creating a tool for harassing one's neighbors. I think this would fail that test. Now, maybe that's
zoning is created so that neighbors can harass each other.
right. Well, right.
Those are the calls we get in our office, unfortunately.
Well, those
I'm just joking.
Okay, those were my concerns, and if it were up to me, I would greatly relax the sizes and numbers standards, and focus it more on big serial billboards than on yard signs and creative designs on the sides of buildings and so forth. But again, I don't have specific amendments to propose.
One more question for David.
Please go ahead.
I mean, is it pretty common to find sign regulations throughout the country? In municipalities and counties and, yeah. So I mean, this is unusual.
No, this is
Yeah.
unusual. We may get a little more specific in the types. Like I think we did have like, if it was freestanding or if it was certain, like if you look at the city of Laramie, they've got all sorts of different types of sign structures. Where ours, we're not even really getting into that.
So these are pretty, simple
Yeah, they're not very
regulations.
prescriptive.
Like, I mean, the cities is
They're very
15 pages or something.
You have to have it on a monument style.
Yeah, monument
Oh.
style.
Size requirements.
No, and I appreciate that you've culled the 15% of the building frontage, all these very formulaic things. I mean, and the organization of it is hugely improved. I don't have any quarrel with that.
And David, is there some recommendation from staff that accompanies this? Are we all looking for action or what?
We're looking for your opinions. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily finished. These are done unless you guys feel like they are. You know, we want to do what you guys think too. I mean, I think that's what you guys exist is like, we write up stuff that think, oh, this looks good, but then we come to you guys and you guys have different opinions and we want to hear those opinions. We want to know what we need to do to make things better, or, you know, for our community. Cause like, you know, I mean, some people in Albany County want very strict everything, and then other people want relaxed. And I think if we can get something in the middle there, that's what we're looking for. But ultimately, this whole project started because of the, you know, constitutional problems. So
So I do advise that something be done.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest that we've had some discussion now, and maybe we should try to have more discussion when all 5 people are here, and then move to action.
That sounds suitable. Mr. Ayers, you were kind of the monitor of urgency. Do you feel that this is something that needs attention in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, a year, 10 years?
I would recommend, I mean, as soon as possible to get unconstitutional regulations off the book.
And that would become a tangible problem were someone to bring a challenge because we had denied them a permit or something. Okay. And how often do we see people coming in for permits, giving us the opportunity to violate their constitutional rights?
I mean, we just had one like a few weeks ago that we've approved, but not a whole lot. I mean, being a county, we don't have a whole lot of commercial businesses, and that's where you usually see the sign permits come from. But yeah, probably like a handful a year, maybe. So maybe less, a couple a year.
Well, I'm not uncomfortable with your suggestion, Ms. Hanning.
Yeah, maybe bring it to the next meeting again and be ready. Hopefully have more of us present to move forward.
Okay. And if that's what we'd like to do, I will make myself an assignment of bringing some specific amendments for your consideration with respect to some of the specific issues. But if we're happy with the growth structure and direction of it, then by all means, let's take advantage of it. That's acceptable. Okay.
And I mean, I will say that, you know, our standards didn't completely come out of, you know, nowhere. There was between the 3 of us and then internally in my office, between a old intern that we had and myself, you know, we did put these standards together.
Well, I think it speaks to a philosophical point in its policy. Obviously, we need to cure its legal defects, but then it really is how many regulations and how severe do you want them to be? That's pure policy, pure politics. The Board of County Commissioners has appointed us to give them our advice.
And I think there's been some attempt to get some diversity of opinion, so if we can get all 5 people to share some thoughts, then maybe we can move forward.
That's good to me. Okay, further discussion of that, or do we have a path forward? And in deference to Mr. Bear's concerns, let's try to wrap it up. Maybe next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, next I'll try to do my part. If I'm gonna be the lobbyist for some changes. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. That moves us to short-term rentals, I believe.
Didn't we pass them? Oh, no, we didn't. That was the accessory dwellings. Let's just put them all in accessory dwellings.
Okay, this is.
No.
Am I still on track? Yes, short-term rentals. Okay.
All right, so we put together kind of a short memo here. Hopefully you guys have looked that over. Basically, I looked at some of the publications from the American Planning Association that put them out, or that has provided a lot of information on short-term rentals. One thing about the planners and American Planning Association is I feel like sometimes they want to get too far into stuff that we don't need to get into, but but I'll pull it back to what I think we should get into. But so they define short-term rentals kind of in 3 different ways, based it on the owner, like in how they're involved. They define them as one definition is a hosted sharing where the primary occupants of the residence remain on site with guests. Unhosted sharing where the primary occupants of the residence vacate the unit while it is rented to a short-term guest. And then dedicated vacation rentals where there are no primary occupants. So basically a company or organization buys these and rents them out. So there are a number of potential impacts, and from one of the zoning practice, which is one of the APA's magazines they put out. Some of these impacts include potentially taking lower cost long-term rentals out of the market, lowering available affordable housing. And there's a debate whether a decline in affordable housing is impacted by short-term rentals or not. There's always 2 sides to everything, I think. So short-term rentals may allow for aging in place for older property owners. Aging in place is allowing people that get older to kind of stay in the same place that they're at because they still have the accommodations and the things that they need as they get older. Stimulates competition with commercial lodging, but short-term rentals have a tax advantage and do not need service workers. They definitely have a tax advantage because in our recent review of some of the short-term rentals we have in our county, I don't know if they're getting taxed by the state the way they're supposed to. So I think the assessor is correcting that problem. And then state and local governments may lose tax revenue provided by commercial lodging. And it goes to that point, I guess, but not regulated for health and safety, building, housing, safety codes. There's no guarantee these units are properly insured. So those are some of the problems that they point out. Teton County, their regulation of short-term rentals is they don't allow them unless they existed prior to May 9th, 1994. Actually, where these exist is outlined in their regulations. In this community, in this community, in this community, this is where you can have them and nowhere else.
I thought I treated them as boarding houses.
That's different.
Under their land use table.
Short-term rentals?
Yeah.
That's
how they're regulated.
I don't know. They define short-term rentals and they say they're not.
Oh.
Yeah, there's actually a section there. I think it's actually in this report.
Yeah, and then they listed you can do it in Teton Pines, you can do it over here, you can do it up there.
Yep. Sublette County, sounds like they just adopted theirs not too long ago. They require a permit. It's good for 24 months. and neighbors must notify nearby landowners of the use. The permit covers health and safety issues. Non-compliance is hired through fines. And then I looked at Laramie County because I always got stuff down south of us. Short-term rental license is required. Their building department must inspect the residents every 4 years. They inspect the residents prior to approval of the license to determine compliance with adopted building codes. So limitations that we have, communities that have adopted building codes have an advantage when it comes to addressing the impacts from short-term rentals. So many of the health and safety concerns are addressed through building codes and those types of things, fire code and those types of things, but we do not have those. I'm not sure how the state views short-term rentals, if they view them as a commercial business, because fire code at the state level applies to commercial properties, but I'm not sure if that'd be a question to ask, I guess, if they look at short-term rentals as a commercial property and they actually go in and check for electrical and fire safety issues. But we don't have any of that at our disposal because we have not adopted any building codes. And then, some of the safety concerns, it's like, I don't know how much we can get into that through zoning. I mean, some of the stuff I think maybe me and Matt need to sit down and kind of talk about, because I'm not sure what we can and can't do. The fact that Sublette County is requiring a 24-month permit, I don't know if we can do that through zoning or not.
Sounds to me like they're gonna be doing that through their code enforcement authority, not
Through building code.
yeah.
Or, okay, through that, okay. Maybe that's what it is. Let's see. And then one thing I do know is from just my discussions with the city, and they've had discussions with other folks, is enforcement of short-term rentals is very hard to do and very time-consuming. And then other articles published by the American Planning Association assured that short-term rental platforms have not worked well with communities when handling issues associated with these uses. I think there was an article that I read. I can't remember where it was. I think it was one of the states or whatever, but they had this whole thing. It might have been like New Orleans or Louisiana or something like that, but all these guys were on board Airbnb and Vrbo, and they were working with everybody. Yeah, we'll help you out with all these things or whatever. And then when it came down to, it's like, hey, will you send us a list of the properties that are going through? Oh no, we can't do that. And that wasn't part of what they worked on, and they like worked on things kind of just for their benefit almost, and it just seemed like, yeah. So they're not a good source of cooperation, it sounds like. I mean, at least from what I read. Maybe they've changed and there's different things going on. And I guess the good thing about these Airbnb and those things, they do have their internal rating systems where, like, if you stay there, I don't know if you guys have stayed on, we've stayed on like one as a family, but you do a rating on them, the rentor does a rating on you. And so there's kind of some internal regulation, but like that doesn't get to some of the stuff that other people are experiencing or other impacts. Yeah. And then obviously the tax thing, they don't provide addresses online, and they won't give you those addresses either. But when you have people to live up there and they identify all those for you and give you their addresses, then you just turn them over to the assessor and they'll get taxed. So not that that's happened, but anyways. So some of the questions that I think we need to dive into and discuss when it comes to these is, one, how does our community feel about short-term rentals? We've heard from like one person in Centennial that's very much opposed to them, and I think we've got two that are very much for them, but they're also the ones that are renting their places for that. So I think before we go forward, I think I would like to see get some more information there. And then another question is, do short-term rentals warrant a different standard than long-term rentals? We've heard all the claims that there are different impacts associated with short-term rentals as opposed to long-term rentals. Where there are no adopted building codes, I'm not sure renters of a unit for 3 days or 1 year will experience anything different when it comes to safety. One benefit of the short-term renters having is that they can analyze the reviews of the others that are using those things. So there's kind of a benefit there, maybe. Just kind of an aside, I bring that question up because these folks, I have heard complaints from time to time how, oh yeah, they're running their snowmobiles or they're having parties late at night or whatever. And I've had the same experience from long-term rentals, or maybe they're actually homeowners down the street from me. So I don't know, like it's hard to like say there's a difference there, but and then the last question would be is what are the regulatory options available to use? The state has provided us broad authority to regulate through zoning. Knowing the scope of this authority is of high importance for our discussion. Can we regulate some of the safety issues similar to building codes through zoning? And that's something that we can explore more. So I guess at this point, I would recommend that we develop and implement a bit of a public engagement strategy. We could hold open house in Centennial because I know that's where this is kind of coming up. We could do one here. We could do an online survey. We could do all those. We could do none of the above. We could decide that this isn't worth our time. But I think if we do go forward, I'd like to hear more from the public on this, just because, I just want to make sure that we hear from everybody on both sides. And then the next recommendation would be develop an appropriate response to the issue based upon the feedback that we receive. If we feel like this is a problem, we do want to require conditional use for this. We want to create a zoning district for just the areas just the Centennial area or something. And say that, decide whatever the standards are in that area, we could do that. I don't know, it might be beneficial to do the whole county. If there's an issue up there might be an issue down here at some point too, but I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. Those are my questions. Those are my thoughts. I just want to hear your thoughts and Matt's thoughts since Matt's standing.
No.
Did you have some preliminary notes before we just?
Yes. So I suppose, the one thing about being an attorney is I get to advise clients on matters which are not just strictly the law. But I would just highly recommend, so far, like all of the comments that we've heard are, heavily anecdotal. We have no empirical evidence about economic impact, things of this nature. Some of them just don't make sense to me. Like how is an Airbnb impacting roads any differently than if a family of like 4 lived there full time? As far as road usage, that, just so I would just encourage kind of skeptical and more objective thought, because this is certainly becoming an issue, not just at the planning and zoning level, but there are some people who are very against this, especially in the Centennial area.
Well, it's kind of interesting too, is one of the properties that they noted was converted to short-term rentals was the Mountain View Hotel, which was a hotel that rented out rooms. So, anyways, that just seems odd, And honestly, if you have run a commercial business, it's like,
wouldn't you want?
Who cares what they do with it as long as it's within the zoning code? Yeah, that's their prerogative to do what they want, But they use that as part of their argument that they're making businesses close down. It's like, no, they have a new owner and they're doing something different. So I don't know.
Thoughts? David, right now, does the city regulate short-term rentals in any way?
No, they do not. They looked into it. Short-term rentals, this whole issue has been around and we've discussed it and we've kind of bopped it around quite a bit in the past. And Yeah, when we've talked to the city, they're like, it's too expensive and too time consuming to enforce, and it's not causing us huge problems, so they're not regulating it. I mean, I think our community is a little bit different than some of the other communities too. It's like, I don't know how many we have in the county. I was quoted as saying the other day, like 50 or something like that. I was like, oh, I'm not sure. There's probably more than 50 in the county. Well, there's definitely more than 50 in the county, but the communities that are regulated have hundreds or thousands, or they're the little communities on the side of the mountain in Colorado that, you know, when half of the housing is used for short-term rentals, that's a problem, you know. And I don't think we're at that point right now, but anyways, that's more than you asked for.
No, that's what I was asking for. You know, when that first comment, you know, information packet came in that was unsigned, you know, I read that and initially reacted with some amount of alarm. I saw there's a real crisis going on. And then we got the other side. And I certainly now appreciate the benefit of having some time elapsed to think about it a little bit more. You know, I'm not convinced there's a bad problem right now at all.
You know, and in the past too, just to add, the North Fork community, that's one of the communities that has a few of these short-term rentals, and they have a homeowners association. That's something they actually could regulate on their own, you know, but I don't think the board is okay with that right now. So,
Put it in your covenant.
you know, I don't
I'll give it some time. Give it some time.
yeah.
Sandy? Drew it in here?
No, I agree that we're missing empirical data about the impact. I mean, I remember one person coming to the meeting we had out at Whedon Pest who talked about having to rescue people who were ill-equipped for the rural winter roads out there, and that was a consistent theme that came up that you might not get from a family that lives there and knows what they're getting into. Maybe, I don't know, or maybe you're just always rescuing people out of snowbanks anywhere in Wyoming at any given time. But I feel like we need more information too. I mean, I just know from my own personal experience that you know, my aging father has a home. We've talked about whether to do a short-term rental kind of thing back on the East Coast, and if we didn't do that, we still would be keeping the house, and it wouldn't go into the rental stock. You know, it wouldn't make an impact in that community one way or another, other than providing a lodging situation to somebody. But we wouldn't be like, okay, we're putting this house into the rental stock. It's still out of it. And you wonder how many of these houses fit that category of people. Sure, they can make income and help make ends meet on it, but if it weren't for that, would they still just be sitting on the house for their own personal use and still taking it out of the housing stock? So I don't feel there's anything to do yet, except unless you want to move forward and collecting information. But then it sounds like, okay, you collect the information, we still have a horrible situation to try to come up with a regulatory system.
So one of the threads that I would like to hear more about is commercial. And at our last meeting, it seemed quite clear, oh, well, these aren't commercial. But I went back and tried to find that. So walk us through, why aren't these commercial enterprises to which commercial zoning would apply?
We view these as a dwelling unit. Dwelling unit is defined as a structure that has a kitchen, living areas, bathroom, and is used for that purpose. Nothing changes whether they rent it out for a few nights or if they're living in it, to change the definition of dwelling. And so dwelling is an okay thing in any of the residential zones.
But if I look at commercial use, having qualities of business as defined in this chapter, then I look at business, a lawful endeavor for the engagement in the purchase, sale, barter, exchange of goods, whereas merchandise or services, for recreation or amusement enterprises. So what if it's a dwelling unit? If it is being offered for sale, barter, exchange, doesn't that make it a commercial dwelling unit? I mean, I guess I don't understand your answers, why being a dwelling unit is positive.
I believe in the land use table, we have it under residential as well. So we go by that definition. For designation, yeah.
So we have designated short-term rentals.
I don't think we have a single designation covering short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals is not in, that term is not in our regulations.
Why it's not a boarding.
So dwelling is under residential. That's where.
Right, but a hotel is a dwelling unit, no?
No.
No. A lot of them do. I'm just looking at where I did, the line didn't seem very bright to me between me buying up 5 cabins up at Centennial and putting a big ad in the paper saying, come on down, folks, my cabins are for rent. What?
I mean, I guess the other thing is if somebody owns the property, they're using it for their own recreational use, and then they're also doing it on the weekend. What's the difference? I mean, that doesn't change it to a commercial property just because they rented it out for a couple of nights, you know?
It doesn't. I mean, what does make something commercial? I guess is the root of my question, please.
Well, so I mean, I understand where you're coming from with those various, kind of broad things, of what a use is, but really what it all comes down to is the land use table. So what is this fitting in as best? And it's kind of an issue that I think that we're running into a lot more on the enforcement side is, I mean, we need definitions for all of those uses listed in the land use table. And to maybe give some more thought about what, those are, because you can say this is a commercial use, that's fine. It doesn't mean that only commercial uses can happen in commercial zonings. You have to go and find what the use is in the land use table to determine its applicability.
So maybe we need to find a home for short-term rentals. We need to define them and find a home for them in our land use tables. But I mean,
that would be how you
good regulations. I'm not trying to correct it one way or another, but that would.
If you wanted to regulate it, well, otherwise, right now its default falls into dwelling because that's the closest thing that we have in the land use table. So it depends on what you want to do with that. But yes, if you were to want to regulate short-term rentals, it would be as a use and then prescribed by zoning districts, just like any other use.
And dwellings are in the land use table. I don't have that in front of me. I didn't look at that piece as what one finds in residential zones. Again, I'm just looking for a more common sense. Commercial means I'm offering it for sale to the public. But
right. I mean, and I guess, even if we said, okay, short-term rentals can be defined by or fit in there under that definition of commercial use, I don't think that matters for our zoning because it's still under allowed in a residential area. Dwellings are. So it doesn't matter.
But
does it?
Well, okay. I guess I would like to parse out some of those definitions a little more closely. Why isn't a rental that has a kitchen a dwelling unit?
Right. And again, I guess what Matt's saying, we have a problem. We don't have definitions to make it we don't have clear definitions on some of these, and we should, and that would help with a lot of this.
And that's the land use table because it actually lists the use, not the broad overview of the type of use. And it actually gives it parameters in the zoning districts. And it could be that you could put some sort of special conditional use permit on short-term dwellings, but it would be limited in what you could regulate.
If one wanted to, one could call it a commercial venture, and commercial enterprises are limited to commercially zoned lands. With one, again, I'm not saying we should, but
you could say that, but it doesn't. But yeah.
And we'll have everybody rezoning commercial.
Because I mean, you run into that issue, like, so the land use table, you got under agricultural uses, tree farm, that's a commercial venture, but.
I mean, and that
it's an
gets into,
agricultural use under the land use tables.
that gets into like, okay, now we're having a residential neighborhood. If it came to the point where, okay, we want to call short-term rentals commercial, and they need to be on commercial property, and I have to rezone to commercial in a residential property. And then you go one term or one thing farther. It's like, well, what, a lot of houses are just rented out. Is that a commercial venture? And now we have to do that commercial as well, right?
Well,
I mean-
once something goes commercial, then you lose control over future commercial use of it. So it sort of opens up a Pandora's box
I mean-
of commercial use.
Next thing you know, it's a funeral home.
With zoning, what we're really trying to do is make sure that the impacts that are happening within an area are within confined standards. That's what zoning is, right? And so that's how we need to look at short-term rentals or anything else. It's like, what are the additional impacts? How are these different from what's already allowed in these zones? Do we need to change this, you know?
Well, I appreciate you looking at some of those other counties and why I was thinking about commercial, the complaints, real or perceived, small or large, go towards the kinds of reasons that we have commercial districts, more traffic, more stuff going on, big signs. So these are of a kind. It looked like what Sublette County did to get at that was these things like you have to live there or you have to own the place. I mean, and then you had to talk to your neighbors. That was their attempt to corral this kind of impact and keep it at the level of neighbors and like you'd get with a long-term rental, as opposed to commercial rentals where it's signs and traffic and turnover and all. How did you feel about what Sublette County had done?
You know, I questioned some of if it was legal to do. I don't know. Honestly.
Okay, well.
I don't know, but I haven't talked to Matt about it. And if it was done through the building department or whatever, that might be different than what we're doing through zoning. But like
usually they plug that into like their LDRs, which is what they call them up in that part of the state. So, you know, they kind of like get an authority infusion from their building code authority that just kind of becomes part of the zoning scheme. So that, you know, is something that we don't have, but it allows them to get into the finer details of the development usage that otherwise wouldn't be available.
And yeah, I mean, and we can do that. I mean, honestly, if you did a conditional use permit, you're notifying your neighbors that you're going to do this. But I mean, I don't really have any issues with, you know, getting your neighbors kind of on board. It's like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And I mean, what I like and what I wish we could do is I think, I don't know which one of the regulations it was, but you know, if there was a way to like corral these things in a simple way to kind of really regulate it, if there's people that are going nuts in these places or whatever, that there's a way to complain and there's a way to remedy that, and you know, make it so they're not having impacts that they shouldn't have. I mean, the one we stayed in, it was like we showed up at the house, we were there, we went and did our thing, and we came back. There wasn't really impacts from my family being in that home, you know. If we could corral in and make sure that the neighborhoods are not being impacted by something that we could do, I mean, that's basically what I would like to see, and whatever that means. And I think letting the neighbors know and working with them is an excellent idea. So,
well, and Sublette, then they required that you have a local contact person. I mean, it just seemed to me like some of the things they were doing captured the concept we have of, hey, I'm not using the place for a week. Let's make a few dollars by renting it to my, you know, my friend from Chicago, as one thing. And then the other spectrum there is the real estate conglomerate from Chicago says, haha, this is hot territory. We're going to buy up everything in sight and turn it into short-term rentals. And that's, I think, the line we're trying to find. So some of those tools, and maybe Mr. Ayers could look at some of those tools like we've seen in these other counties, and could they fit if we wanted to? I mean, it sounds like some of those are coming from a different legal context. So what are our options within our existing authority?
Yeah, so I mean, really, it comes down to putting it in the land use table first and foremost. I'd like to provide a definition on, exactly what short-term rental would be, because I guess like in your example, where you're just thinking about, well, what if you just said for your friend from Chicago? Yeah, but since we're not going to be there for a week and you're going to be using it for a while, if you could just, pay us the X amount of money so we can cover like utilities, well, then is that, short-term rental? But also, I guess as far as the permit authority itself, or what would that want to be structured like, I would kind of hope for a little more definitive direction before I went down those avenues, because that could, ultimately it seems like David has provided kind of what other places in the state are doing, and we can't really look outside the state because they don't have the same statutory.
Yeah, and they were doing licensing and.
Yeah, we're not, we can't license businesses. They would just have to be the use, and what are the parameters of those use? I think, the local contact person, that makes me a little nervous. Just because.
How zoning?
Yeah.
Well, and the one thing that I do like about sublets too is, it's similar to licensing, is the permit's good for 2 years, and then you have to come back and, you can review the complaints that you may have received and use that. But then again, it's like, I don't know if that's okay to do that, other than, I like that, but I just don't know. Our zoning regulation, or the zoning statutes say we can regulate for public health, safety, welfare, it's
Yeah.
And moral,
we're not, but those are limited,
Focus.
really.
What you're limited to is, regulating the use and location of structures and land.
So if we give maybe we should have a conversation elsewhere, but like if we give, if we give a permit for a zoning certificate, we can't put a timeline on that, but you can't put a.
But we could hypothetically require a permit for short-term rentals. We'd have to define what a short-term rental was. Is that I'm understanding that right?
Yeah.
That's within our authority, and that permit then could have conditions like, I don't know, one person can't own more than 4 of them, or they have to talk to their neighbors and bring in affidavits, and we could through that permit vehicle exact certain requirements.
Certainly, and it could also be an opportunity to check that they're not like overloading septic. But yeah, it would need to stay like use based and not enter into that sort of licensing arena. It's a fuzzy line, but I don't know. I usually kind of get a gut feeling of when it's about to cross that line.
Yeah, no, okay, that's helpful.
I guess the reason I think I like the 24-month deal is like, if that's not there, we still have an opportunity to revoke a permit if it's not following the standards. But that is a much more difficult process than it would be to not give them a new permit. So.
It would be a contested case here, which we need to.
I won't comment on that, but.
And I don't know that we need to wait until it's a big problem. I think we all know enough to know that it can be an issue. As I indicated to the woman that did the piece in the Boomerang, it's happening in New York City, it's happening in Centennial. That's pretty A to Z kind of a land use issue. So I think it's worth us thinking about, but limited time and energy. Can't think about everything. I'd agree it's not high priority. Thoughts?
Well, in big cities, I know it's a big issue because there is an ongoing competition contest between hotels, motels, and short-term rentals. That's big time. Of course, we're not in that situation here. And it could become a problem, even if it's not a problem today, whether or not it is, it's something, there's a potential out there. It may surface actually sooner in the city, I'm thinking, rather than out in the county, which is why I asked David if there are any regulations for the city. Now, I think it's worthwhile thinking about trying to be a little proactive rather than reactive. And maybe a land use permitting type process would be the way to go.
So, I mean, it's easy for us to say, study this out, tell us what you come up with. We want to put it on a scale, is that or do you want to suggest one, something not the highest priority if you've got other things that are more pressing, but let us continue to gather thoughts.
Sure.
Is that reasonable?
Or what about the sort of like call for public input that you had discussed earlier?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how elaborate is that. That starts to become a chore, doesn't it?
I mean, I could put an online poll together pretty quickly, just throw it on the website or whatever, but I don't know how much we would get from that.
Well, the folks at Centennial that would direct traffic towards the website, it would cease to be very random
Sure.
that way.
I think it'd almost be better to meet with people, but I don't know. Maybe put that off till summer or something.
Like an open house idea.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not really a high priority, and I don't know if it is, I'm fine with like punting on this for a little bit, you know.
Do you
Get
have
some of this other stuff done?
Sorry, are there specific contacts within the Centennial community? I was disturbed that thing came to us anonymously, for example. But are you in communication with those folks that are concerned about this?
Yeah, I have an email address for the one lady that sent that. They were supposedly doing some petition too, which I haven't seen, so I don't know if they're still trying to collect signatures. So I don't know.
What I'm thinking is maybe put some of that burden. Bring us a proposal, folks. It doesn't have to be I's dotted, T's crossed, but what would those who think it should be regulated like that regulation to look like? Just to give us something to shoot at, might be a useful way to elicit some impact without just adding it to your list of things to think about.
Sure.
If the numbers that I recall seeing are roughly correct, 600-ish properties up there and roughly 24-ish short-term rentals, that also doesn't strike to me as being some sort of wild, crazy situation that demands immediate attention.
Is that enough sense of prioritization?
Yeah.
Scale of 1 to 10, that's a 4. I don't know.
Yeah, that's perfect. So.
And then, a constructive step might be to try to get our minds around a definition. Just what is this thing that we're talking about? So I guess I would maybe make that a little higher priority. Just get some taxonomy for the discussion at least. That is a useful thing to do.
Okay.
Okay, you done with that one? I see nods. Aquifer protection overlay zone amendments then is the next item on our fast disappearing agenda. Did you want to say anything about your staff memo, or you want to just open this to comments?
You guys can just talk.
Yeah. I listened in on I talked to one of the city councilors and listened to their discussion last evening on the boundary adjustments. I had some concern that the thought had gotten lost between the so-and-so said so-and-so said so-and-so said so-and-so. And then the feedback I got was that there was no distress at all, that they're taking a slightly different approach than we are to the western boundary. They approved the western boundary based on property lines. In the second reading last evening, it's certainly, my impression was that will go forward without impediment and without any sense that that there's a discontinuity there. Councilor O'Doherty was the specific one who had talked to me in the past about trying to have everyone follow the cap recommendations as closely as possible. I think she was mollified when I explained that we were extracting all of our lines from the cap. We were just trying to recognize this geometric difference between big lots and little lots. So just FYI, I think that went along smoothly. So at some point, I think a what's left markup would be appropriate. You gave us the one that Stantec had provided some months back. And I think we have pretty well taken care of section 5 entirely. Now, it remains to be seen what the board will do, but if I'm understanding where we are, there's now chunks of what we got from them by way of recommendations that we have dealt with.
Yes.
So at some point going forward, maybe you could give us and here's what's left. To my mind, the big things, well, there's a kind of a catch-all that's the details of SSIs and how those costs are apportioned and who gets to say what to what. Things like what requires a setback. There's a lot of small but potentially important adjustments that have been recommended to us that we will need to take under consideration. And I think the coherent way to do that would be in that kind of red light strikeout format. They wanted to change some of the table of prohibited uses. So if you could bundle those up for us, would be my thought. To just help pre-chew it a little bit. And then there's that whole section 11 on wastewater regulations and inspections and standards and so forth. So I think we all understand that you guys are working within the office to move those into wastewater regs. What can you tell us by way of schedule on that? Is that coming along? Can we expect to see some results from that in X amount of time? What can you tell us there?
Yeah, so we have a preliminary draft that's been reviewed by our wastewater assistant planner, environmentalist in wastewater. And I just have to have some time to make some changes based on her comments. And then there'll probably be a little more back and forth. I mean, my hope is to have it on our next meeting agenda for something to look at. If not, it'll probably be the following. So just depends on, I don't know, we're getting some things out of this arena. So I think I should have some more time to look at some of that stuff. So hopefully my goal is this next meeting. So.
And is Mr. Harris involved in that loop?
He will be. We're trying to get it through. He will be. Yeah. So once I get it done with, or finish that off in our office, we'll send it over to Matt and his office. So, I mean, I guess it depends on when I can get it over to
Or I'll come to you.
Huh?
I'll come to you.
Okay.
So I can know what I'm looking at.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, where are we in the time frame of the lawsuit over the 35 acres?
Yes, so the district court has scheduled an oral argument for next Thursday, November 16th. This is new. Judge Cricken never requested oral argument for, I think, the 5 or 6 appeals I had before the district court prior to this. And then I would imagine that will put the decision off by at least another 4 weeks after that. But I'm not entirely sure. So yeah, we're still out there, and then I would expect Supreme Court as a next step after that. But I mean, I don't think that it should stop any work from going on, unless of course Supreme Court would come back and say that the county doesn't have the authority to do any of this, in which case,
In your cover memo, Mr. Gertz, you said the boundary amendment would go before the county commissioners for approval in January. What that struck me, I thought that would be.
You have to put it out for 45 days.
That was the end of the 45 days.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I was expecting that might be the answer. When I talked to Chairman Gosar, I understood it was not on their agenda for next
It's on next
meeting,
meeting.
but maybe the one after that.
Yeah, it'll be on,
Next meeting.
yeah, so, yeah,
21st.
yesterday, we had a meeting yesterday, it wasn't on that.
Yesterday,
agenda, but it'll be on. Yeah.
So the thought is that the 45 days would have expired and they would be ready for final vote early January.
Yes,
Yeah.
it'll be the second Tuesday, or the third Tuesday in January is when that'll be on the agenda.
Okay, other thoughts on that? I think we do want to move forward. The end is in sight, rather than letting it kind of languish. And we can move those other bits forward.
Yeah, maybe depending, if I have some time, maybe I'll try to work on some of those other areas like the land use table and that type of, I mean, some of that stuff's, I mean, staff's not gonna really wanna change what Stantec or, the cap says. We're just gonna put that in there and recommend it,
So for non-conforming use.
Yeah, your list there, your 5 points, I think those kind of hit them all, and it's just a matter of kind of queuing it up for discussion and potential resolution. Some of those might generate some adjustment and controversy, and that's why I referred to it in terms of the tower we talked about earlier. That's a significant change. What has to meet the setback requirements.
Sure.
So to say those are odds and ends, I don't mean to belittle their importance. Some of them could become quite important. So let's prep those for maybe discussion in our next meeting.
Okay.
Just a little more isolation of them. That's all I had to offer on APOZ stuff. You guys?
Well, I guess as an aside to that, I've been doing some more education into GPS coordinates.
Okay,
all that.
no.
And I'm more intelligent than I was before on these matters. And by the next meeting, I think I'll be pretty much up to speed. I don't know if he'll ever come up again, but
You'll be ready for it.
All right, well, let's throw that into our commissioner's comments agenda item. Fair enough. Are there anything or
Nits and lumens.
have we learned about nits and
Candela is, well, it has to do with the amount of light a 10-inch candle will put off.
made of beeswax candle or?
What was standard? I guess
I don't know.
back in, around the treatment section.
At sea level or something. Okay, our next regular meeting is December 13th, 5 o'clock here. Were there other commissioner comments?
for me.
As usual, we've exhausted the traveling public. And it's only what, 7?
It's early.
7:40?
Yeah, this is.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about.
But it feels much later since the clocks have changed.
Oh, yeah.
Something happened with daylight savings time here.
Yeah. Somebody should be lobbying for, we all agree we shouldn't change the time all the time, but we should go with standard time instead.
Yeah, we should go.
I mean, that's somebody.
It should be like Arizona,
Like
only in
Arizona,
that way.
right.
The National Sleep Institute recently recommended that
Regular.
it does stay just daylight savings time, so.
Wait, daylight savings, not
Or sorry,
standard.
at standard.
Yeah.
All I know is the dogs in Arizona are not confused about what.
Well, I think there's some sentiment in some of the national legislators and some of the local ones that they can make the day longer. That's like Canute stopping the times. I mean, the name of it is the Daylight Preservation Act. Well, sorry, boys, it didn't work that way. So when I worked the numbers in Sheridan, on the solstice, the sun's going to come up at 9:30 if we stayed on daylight savings all the way through. I mean, nobody would like that.
No, the Senate rushed to do something and they were doing it.
Yeah, right. All right, at some point, we'll get a resolution out of this zoning commission. That'll bring what it needs. All right, hearing nothing, no objections, we'll adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
About a week ago, I was